Although OutSystems has a good enough end user management application out of the box, this can be used for creating and managing users and even resetting their passwords. For certain use cases, you may want to expose these features to the user themselves, for example, forgot password. In this video, let's see how we can build this on our systems. Before I start implementing anything, let me explain that there are different ways of implementing forgot password. The key steps involve identifying who this user is. This usually is based on user supplying the email address or user ID or username or phone number. Once you have this, you can go on to next step, where is you verify. Some applications don't even do that. They immediately just send the password to the email address. They reset and send it. Other applications also use a way of sending OTP. In this case, you can generate a random number, store in database, and send the same number via email or SMS to the user. And on the verify screen, you allow the user to key in the number, and then you compare whether it's the same number to verify that this indeed is the right user. There are also certain other applications that use security question. So during this time, when you are signing up, they allow the user to set up some security question along with the contact details. And when you verify next time when the user is doing forgot password, they verify whether it's the right answer. Now, once you move on from verification, you have the right user, you allow him to change or reset the password by going to a change password screen where he keys in the password, confirms the password, and it's good to go. Now, in my video, what I'll be doing is I'll use the security question way of doing the implementation, and I'll do it in few steps. First of all, just to show you the part here, I will implement the sign up page where I capture the security question and answer. Then when somebody is clicking on forgot password, I'll go to the identify step. I'll ask them to either key in their email address or the user ID to identify who this user is. Once we know who this is, I'll retrieve his security question from database and allow him to enter his answer. And then the last step is allowing him to change the password. So this will be the fourth step. So do take note of this step. Once you understand how I'm doing these things, I think the other ways of implementing like OTP or sending password also is similar, and you might get the idea of how to implement those. So let's get started. You're looking at my Service Studio. I have a mobile application with an entity called customer, these attributes, and the usual customer listing and details screen. What we'll do quickly is modify our sign up page to capture additional details for security question and answer. For that, I will be extending the user table by creating another table called user extend. And this will have attributes like birth date and security question. Make sure the attribute is long enough to capture long questions, and security answer. Later on, we'll also set up a link between this and the user table so that there's one-to-one relationship between them. For that, you select the user ID field. Make sure this is the same type as user identifier. In case you want to have more details on this, feel free to watch my video on user profile, which is where I explain a bit more in detail of what I'm doing here. Basically, things, additional fields that we want to capture for sign up page. Thereafter, we'll go on to the login page under common interface, and we'll add the buttons for sign up. We can also rename it to sign up, looks more relevant. And thereafter, I can also put the button using the widget tree into a container. So I can center the button and at the same time add some margin, so it has some space between the two buttons there. And the next step for the button itself, sign up button, we will add logic for clicking. When somebody clicks on this, we'll redirect him to the new page for sign up. Now again, there's another video for sign up also. You can watch it to understand a bit more in detail. I'll be a bit faster here because as of now, we are just doing the preliminary steps of capturing the question and answer. We are not at the forgot password yet. So for creating this sign up page, we will get a form. Form will have data capture required for the user. It has a bit more information. So again, you can watch the video on the sign up. There's another video there. I can get rid of all of these fields which I don't require, but I can add the fields that I require. For example, the security question and the security answer. There was one more important step for creating an account is the password. By default, as per the security check, we don't provide the password when you drag and drop, so you have to add it manually. Input. Makes sense to put it next to the username and tie it up with the password field. put a prompt there, type your password. Once this is there, we will provide the logic for saving when somebody is saving the form. So this is where we can add a reference to the encrypt password. This is a very important step. Look for a module called users and add reference to encrypt password. We can't store passwords in human readable format in database, so that's why we have to encrypt it. Now next we trigger the call to that function, encrypt password. It has the username and password there. What it does, it returns the password in a field, encryptor field, so you'll use the assignment operator to make those assignments. So get user by ID, this one, where we have the password field. It will have the output coming from the step above, the action above, encrypted password, and thereafter some of the mandatory fields in the user, like creation date, that should be off now, and is active, so the user is able to log in. We do want him to be active. Thereafter, once these assignments are there, we will switch to data tab and use the out of the box create option here for the user, and we'll supply the user. In the next step, we will get the ID of the newly created user and assign it to the user extend ID, something like this. ID will be of the user which is just now created, and then we will use the create option here for the user extend and create the user extend record as well, where the security question is saved. All this is done, we can redirect the user back to the login page, which is in the common, and the user should be able to log in with his newly created account. In the database side, we will have a security question and answer saved. To make sure user is able to access this, make sure the page is anonymous, otherwise he will keep on coming back to the login page. Now this was step one, where we created the sign up page and we have the additional fees there to capture the security question and answer. The second step is to get the question based on a user ID or email, and second thing is validating the answer is correct or not. So for this, make sure that you're paying attention to this part. I'm going to logic and I'm going to create some server actions to make my job easier later on. So first one is check user. This is the one I will use on the identify screen, where somebody, when they key in their username or email address, I can pass it to this function and confirm whether this ID exists or not. So in this case, I'll put some input parameter, user info. It could be email or the username. And based on this, I'll return some output parameter. It could be the ID of the user found, and one more for the question. So if the user is found, chances are there's a question, I can retrieve it to send it back. The logic of this, so how we do it, we run a query on the user table, get users, and we'll modify this aggregate to put a filter there, something like this. We can also put a join on user extend. Okay, so we have both sources in there. In the filter, we'll add a filter to say user.name, no, not username, username is equals to the input parameter user info, or since we are using the same field for email as well, it could be by both. Let's put an or condition, and it could also be user info. Based on this, if the user is found, let's go back to the logic. We can put a condition just to check. Condition to check if we did get anything back or not, something like this. If it's empty, we don't have to do anything. We can actually just leave it blank. End of the flow. If we do get something back, that's where we do the assignments to the output variable. So first output variable is the user ID itself. We'll assign the ID of the user that we get in the query, something like this. And the second one is the question itself. So the question output variable will get the question retrieved from the user extend table. Now, because we did one-to-one mapping, the platform understands this and it brings the details from both of these tables. The question is here and the question will be there. So that's one logic we have implemented here. It's reusable. We can recall it from any screen. We can also make it public to even call it from other applications. That's a topic for another day. Second server action I want to create is for checking the answer. If the user on verification screen provides me an answer or a question, I should be easily able to check it. So I'll call check answer. This will also have input and output parameters. So input parameter could be the user ID and the Another input parameter would be the answer that is providing, and the output parameter is whether this is correct or not. By default, this is correct can be set to false. And then the logic. So imagine if I have a user ID and an answer given by the user, I should be able to find out whether the answer is correct or not. How do I do this? I'll run a query on user extend. I will look for a specific user. So filter, add filter, user extend ID should be equals to the ID that we are getting from the input parameter, which is this. So we get one user, and based on this, we run a if condition. So if the user that we are getting, his answer is same as the answer that we are getting from our input parameter. If this is same, correct, I mean the answer and the answer in our database is same, we set the variable is correct to true, and then we end the flow. Likewise, on the other side, let's change it to false. Is correct becomes false. Okay. Now, once these two logics are there, thereafter we go to create the forget password screens. For this, I'm switching over to the interface tab, and again, login page. We'll modify the default placeholders there. So by default, there is a forgot password option there. It's not doing much as of now. It's just directed to this empty logic. You can open it up and see that it's empty. We can change it to a new screen. Let's call it forgot password. Now, this is the first screen where I will be using it to identify the user. So forgot password. Here, what we need to do is allow user to key in his username or email. So input field would be good. We can put a prompt saying enter your user name or email. We can tie it up with a new field, a new local field. Let me call it local, rename it to local user info. So we know that this is on my local page. And then we can put a button here to check. Okay, I'll put up the logic in a while. Let me just create the screen first. Thereafter, we can also, let's say, create a card here. Card section would be good, I guess. I can put this card section into a container. That's a div again. We put some margin because it's too close to the button there. This one. Okay, and then in here I can put some variables. So there are a few variables that we require on forgot password. User info is one, but beyond that we also require some local variables, which is found. By default, let's set it to false. Second is the question itself, and the third would be the answer, and then user ID. Okay, how do we use it? So question, when we have the value, will go in here. We'll display the question. For answer, we want this to be input, so user can key in like this and tie it up with the answer field. And then we will put a button to verify whether the answer is correct or not. Now, all of these things we will put in a if. So again, going back to the container, this container where we put the content card, I can put in a if, and if is tied to if found. So is found is the variable that we'll use to show or hide this part. We'll only show it if we found somebody. So now thereafter, we will provide the logic for checking. So first thing is checking. Now this is where I want to use that function that we created earlier on, check user. So I just drag and drop this here, switch by switching to logic tab. And then user info will be the field coming from the local field that is tied to the first input box. And based on that, I get the information. So remember, in the check user logic, there are true and false branches. If we don't find it, we leave user ID field empty, which could be null. So I can put that as a condition. So if check ID user ID not equals to null, okay, if it's that, then we continue. So continue as in we set the variables, we provide the value to the local fields. So user ID will be the user ID that we are getting, and the question would be question that we are getting, and we will set the value of is found to true. Okay, since we get the user there, and that will show up this section there, just to show you what I mean. So if the is found value is true, then this section will show up because we put that in a if. Okay, so this is visible. Now user can provide the answer here. Let me go back just to make sure everything is okay. If it's not, then in the false branch we will say is found is false. So that section for verification for the question part does not show up, and then we'll end the flow both sides. Okay, so that's the logic for checking the user. If we found, we display this section here. That was the logic. Now second thing is about the verification of the answer itself. So we provide the answer, then we'll provide the logic for what happens when verification, and this is where we'll use the second logic for checking the answer. So check answer has input parameters. Platform already prompts me for that because we set these user parameters here. So in this case, check answer requires the user ID. Now we already have that on the page. Let's pass it. And answer will be the field, the information coming from the answer field, which is tied to the input parameter. Now with this, we should be able to get the response on which we can run the if. The if runs on the is correct. The output variable that we are getting from answer is correct. So depending on is correct or not, if it's false, let's display a message saying your wrong answer, and let this be a type of error. But indeed, if the answer is correct, we can redirect the user to a new page where he can change his password. So that would be, maybe I can put a message there first saying correct answer, just so I know, and thereafter I can direct it to the new screen where he can change the password. So this is the last step, step 4, where we are allowing, we got the right answer, we have the user, and we are allowing him to change the password. So that goes like this. This change password screen would have also input parameter, change password. Let's give relevant titles. So change password can have the mandatory input parameter for user ID. We do want to know who this user is, and if it's coming from forgot password to verification and to change password, we already have user ID. We can pass these parameters between the screens, and then let's set some local parameters. So let's say one could be local password, and another one could be local confirm password. These are the things that people usually do. They want to get the password again so that they can make sure it's the same password. And thereafter, it's straightforward. Look for input here. 1, 2. First one we can tie to the password field. Second one we can tie to the local password, confirm password. And then these could be the password field, as the name is there. Platform is already finding it. We can put some prompt there. Confirm password. And this one is password. And then we can provide the logic in a form of button. The button would say change. Okay. Now this button also we can put in a condition. Usually both passwords have to be same, then only you should be able to change. So for that, what I can do is the widget tree where I have the button. I can put this in a if. And the if would be if local password and confirm passwords are same. That's how you do it. So then only it will be visible. If not, it will not be visible. Thereafter, once you click on the button, we want the user to be able to change his password. We'll do it the same. We have to encrypt the password first. We already have the reference to this field, so we can do it. Username would be the username that we are getting. So in this case, there's one step that we have to do. On the change password, using the input that we are getting, user ID, we have to run a query. We can right click on the page and fetch it from the database, so we can retrieve the information of the user. Something like this, retrieve the information and put a filter to use the user ID parameter there. So only retrieve that one user whose ID you are getting in the input parameter. So now we have one user there. Based on this, when we go to encrypt password, this was the page where we were earlier on. We pass on the username in the username, and password would be one of the field, which if it's confirmed or not confirm doesn't matter. We can provide any of these because the button only appears when they are same. So let's say local password. Based on this, we'll get the output, which will assign to our password field in the user. Something like this. It's similar to what you did earlier on the sign up page. So the password is here, and it will get the value of the output from the previous function, something like this. And thereafter, we'll switch to data tab to use the update user operation, and we'll pass in the current user that we have. And this should do it. Let's put a message. Password change. And success. With this, we can redirect the user to the login page. So you can log in again. And there you go. Last step, let's make sure all of these pages are accessible to anonymous user because user is not logged in yet. So anonymous for change password, anonymous for forget password, and sign up. I think we already made it last time. So one error is showing up there is because in the change password, we set the input parameters user ID. When we are coming from forget password after verification, here it is prompting for that because input parameter is mandatory. That's what it's highlighting. Let's apply that, just expand it, and you have the user ID on the page. That's it. In the end, just publish it. And let's see if it's working fine or not. It was a rather longer video, but if you understand, there are multiple steps to it, mainly because of the approach that you want to use for implementing forgot password. I hope everything works fine and you were able to understand what I was doing. Okay, so the app is published. Let's launch it to see if it's working fine. So that's the login page. Let me switch this to Galaxy Note. It's a bit wider. So we'll test the sign up page first. This was the first thing I did. We create an account for maybe James Bond. Username could be Bond. Password could be Monday. I better make sure it's the correct password. And security question could be, let me use what was your first school, and answer ABC preschool. And we save it. The user got created and we try to log in just to test if everything is working. Bond was the username and password was Monday. So I'm able to retrieve the customer listing and detail screen. That's what I did. Now with this, what I will do is log out. And then we'll use the forgot password. So let's say James Bond forgot his password. He comes here, he verifies or he identifies himself. It can be Bond, that's his username. Check, and it was found. So that's why it's the question corresponding to his user account is shown here. And the answer is ABC preschool. You should also additionally implement two lower, two uppercase kind of functions. Those are built-in functions in OutSystems, so that user it's not prone to user providing some wrong information, and you verify. So that's the correct answer. With that, I'm on the change password screen, and I can set a new password. I'm going to change it to Tuesday. Tuesday. You can't see it. That's the security feature, but I'm changing it, and the password is changed now. To test my new password, I'm going to log in again with Bond. And the password is Tuesday. I hope it works, and it's working fine. So that's how, guys, you implement the forgot password functionalities. Thanks for watching.